Well, hi everybody. Guten Tag. And thank you, Andrea. I've been promoted to being a lady. I'm very honoured with that. It's lovely to be here because I first met these wonderful people of Global Purpose and Green Heart in Chicago just over a year ago when I was there to speak alongside Irvin Laszlo and Larry Dossi. And it's so special to be here in Berlin with you all and seeing how the Global Purpose movement is really accelerating and moving forward. So before I talk about what I really wanted to talk about, which is living the power of unity, I'd like to share a little bit about my own journey of purpose. When I was 2.5 years old, I had my first non-spoken sense of embodied purpose when my mother divorced my father for cruelty. And I didn't know anything about it in my head, but I certainly knew something about it in my heart, because kids at that age just soak up emotion. And my mother married again, and my adopted dad was a wonderful coal miner, a big bear of a man. And he died when I was 10 years old. So by the age of 10, I'd lost 2 dads. So that got me into a journey of saying, you know, this emotional stuff sucks. I think I'm going to go into my head. And I was pretty good about going into my head. And that led me on a journey that is still ongoing. But it took me many, many, many years to realize that what I thought was a sanctuary of going into my head and closing down my heart was actually a prison. So my journey of purpose really has taken me on a really scenic route to get here with you all. But what kept me going through all those years was curiosity. Curiosity about the world, curiosity about the nature of reality itself. And I was supported on this journey when I was 4 years old. It began when I was 4 years old, when I was in my bedroom, and a light appeared in the upper top corner of my room, and I began to hear a voice. And hey, what's not normal when you're 4 years old and somebody starts to say, hi, how are you? Let's have a conversation. And that began an inner and outer journey of exploration and discovery that continues to this day. But what it made me realize from that get-go was that however tough the world appeared, this world appeared, the physical world appeared, I knew at a profound level of experience that reality was much greater, much wider, much deeper, much broader, much more multidimensional than the journey I was walking in the physical world. And it also gave me, despite all the challenges and all the journey, it gave me a support of realization just how much we are all interconnected and ultimately can support each other. So I, as Andrea said, I did a master's degree at Oxford University, specializing in astrophysics and quantum physics, because I wanted to understand how what I was experiencing, walking between worlds, actually landed in the physical realm. And the language of science seemed a reasonable way of trying to figure that out. But at the same time, I was fascinated by ancient wisdom, the wisdom of the ancient Indian sages, of ancient Egypt, of ancient China, and the realization of those deep, deep insights into worlds and reality that I was more familiar with. The scientific perspective seemed to be very limited at that time and has progressed since, thank goodness. And then I'd had enough of learning for a while, and so I went into business and corporate life and ended up being the most senior businesswoman in the UK for about 10 minutes in the 1990s. But it gave me an understanding of differences between people as well as connections between people. For people, I was working in 36 countries. So I was working with people for whom English wasn't their first language. I was working with people from many, many different cultural environments. And it taught me a huge amount. It taught me to meet people where they're at, or at most half a step ahead of where they are, and not try and bring them over a great distance to where I'm at. And if what I was saying and doing and being with people didn't reach them at that level, then it wasn't communication. As John said, you know, interconnections and bringing together and co-creating are about seeing each other, hearing each other, feeling that deep connectedness, appreciating the differences. So after being 25 years in that environment, my curiosity was still taking me onwards. And so I went and did a PhD in archaeology in the University of Reading in the UK, and studying ancient cosmologies, which again I'd been researching and experiencing and learning from the wisdom keepers of for many, many years. But I just wanted to bring that all together and begin to offer a bridge between that ancient wisdom and what leading edge science was finally beginning to catch up with, and underpinning that, a deeper appreciation of the nature of reality itself. Because our beliefs drive our behaviors. So if our beliefs are of a purely materialistic and separate world, then collectively that's how we behave. So I wanted to see whether there was a possibility of reconciling and integrating all of these deep wisdoms and deep appreciations. So working with the wisdom keepers, both incarnate, indigenous wisdom keepers, discarnate, ancestral traditions, deep intelligences that are not physical, but were still guiding me and teaching me and helping me to learn more about this realization of reality. And then I went on a journeys around the world to really work with Mother Earth, with Gaia, and really feel into what she calls to us to be in relationship, in right relationship with her. And I also got a sense that something was coming, something that was intangible at that point but was coming, some kind of shift of awareness. A time was coming where we were going to be waking up and growing up and showing up. And as part of this, we'd also be cleaning up. We'd be healing ourselves of those old limitations and those traumas. And that's a process. And it's a birthing process amidst all the turmoil that John described. Yes, but I see this time as a birthing process. And are any of you here parents? So you know a time comes when a birth is on its way, where all the mother can do is breathe and push. And all the father can do is hold her hand and get it almost torn off. And that's really, I feel, where we are. We're going through a birthing process that, however turbulent it is, may offer us the opportunity to literally remember who we really are. And in that remembering, not only find and experience and embody our true purpose on individual levels, but come together, link up, and come together to co-create something that we can perhaps, or we have perhaps dreamed of, but now is within touch, now with us in feeling. Love is now ready to really land in our collective perspective. So I'm hoping I'm going to push this in the right direction, but bear with me. Oh, here I am. I wanted to write this book 60 years ago because this is how I experienced reality at that time, literally as a cosmic hologram, a multidimensional cosmic hologram. And as in holograms, profoundly interconnected and relational and reflective, but holarchic, growing and growing, scaling up, scaling down, playing out. But I couldn't write this book until now. It's been out about a year because the evidence wasn't there. And I didn't want to write a book that just came from experiences, however valid they are, and they are far more than, you know, whatever else. But I knew that for a lot of people, we're not really willing to open the door to these possibilities of experiences without the hard evidence, as it were. And by hard evidence, most people say scientific evidence. So what I needed to do was to bring together as much evidence of this as I could. And the evidence really wasn't sufficiently compelling until about 2 to 3 years ago. And since then, there's been a flood of evidence. And even since the book has been out, there's been a growing level of evidence on the scale of our entire universe, in terms of new theoretical understanding, and in terms of actually testing this deep interconnectedness as far out as 600 light years from Earth by untangling photons to show that that deep interconnectedness is the way our universe is. Uh-oh. Can somebody help me out here? I think I'm pressing the right direction, but if I'm not, thanks, Carly. Let me show you. It wasn't on. So true. I feel like that so often. So, welcome to the whole worldview of unified reality. And this may appear radical, except it has roots in our collective awareness that go back many thousands of years. What this is describing is what the Indian Vedic sages over 3,500 years ago saw as the nature of reality, ultimately unified, interconnected. They talked about Indra's net. They said, let's describe reality as a myriad of jewels, each jewel with a myriad of facets of faces, each facet reflecting each other, each jewel, each facet connected by golden light. Well, that's beautiful, and it's also a description of a hologram. So we've got 3,500 years and many, many other ancient traditions that perceive the unity, the unified nature of reality. And not just ancient understanding, but many pioneering scientists have had this same perspective. Max Planck, one of the great pioneers of quantum physics, talked about consciousness as being primary. And this is exactly what this emergent new perspective is saying, that consciousness isn't something we have. It's not an accidental epiphenomenon of accidental, random, evolutionary track. It's something that we and the whole world literally are. John Archibald Wheeler, who coined the term black holes, talked about it from bit, in other words, manifested reality, not in the form of energy and matter, which it is, or space-time, which it is, but all of that being emergent from a deeper level of reality, of intention, that's informational, exactly the same as the digital bits, the ones and zeros, that we can describe anything in the so real world in terms of. He understood that this is how the real world is manifested. And we can now begin to say and to appreciate that instead of a great thing, our universe is a great thought. More and more understood as a finite thought in the infinity and eternity of what Einstein called cosmic mind. Hey, we know that every cell in a human body, every cell in any body has its place, has its function, has its purpose, has its authentic purpose. It's not pretending to be something it's not. It's not doing it because somebody's telling it should do it. It's doing it because it is what it is. And no cell is redundant, and every cell is interconnected. And an organism works on the basis of not every cell being the same, but differentiated, so that an organism has many functions that enable it to be ever more complex. So for us, every single cell in our body is connected. It's part of the whole. It has an effect on the whole. It's affected by the whole. Nothing's redundant, nothing by accident. What we're now finding, not just as cosmologists, but across all scales of existence and across many, many different fields of research, is our universe exists and evolves as an organism. Again, we now know that we're like a cluster of cells. Our solar system is like a cluster of cells within a galaxy. So we are clusters of cells within the beautiful embodiment of Gaia. Gaia is a cluster of essential universal cells within our solar system. Perhaps SOULAR. Our solar system is a cluster within our galaxy. Our galaxy is a cluster within a supergalaxy. Supergalaxies are clustered within our universe. And our universe exists and evolves as a unified entity. Before the 20th century, science had started to sort of look at the natural world from the 16th and 17th centuries. And the early scientists were called natural philosophers. And they were told it was okay to look at the physical world as long as they didn't get anywhere near religion. That was off limits. And most of them heard that and were very sensible and didn't go off limits. The few that did were classified as heretics, and some were even burnt at the stake. So this was serious business. And you had to have a real sense of your purpose if you're actually going to try and understand what the nature of physical reality is. What that did, though, is it started to break down physical reality, to take apart the bigger bits to see what the smaller bits were made of. And Newton did that with light, separating white light into the rainbow of light. He also stuck needles in his eye to try and understand optics. That is purpose. That is embodied purpose. But what that did is it got us to a place where scientists by the end of the 19th century were saying that space and time are absolute, they're just a background, and energy is something and matter is something else, and we're not sure what either is, but they're not connected. But at that point, science got to a point where it said, we pretty much sorted everything, the rest is just detail. To the extent that various leaders of universities were saying to students, don't come and study physics. It's pointless. We've figured out everything. Well, that's always dangerous, because only a few years later, anomalies in physical phenomena were showing up that this Newtonian view was limited. It wasn't that it was wrong, it was just limited. And so the quantum revolution and the relativity revolution showed that, first of all, energy and matter are equivalent, and that we can't consider space and time as absolute by themselves. We have to consider how space is relative to an observer and time is relative to an observer. But we have to bring them together in something called space-time to then become invariant, to then become absolute, because otherwise our universe would not exist and evolve as a unified entity. And what I'm saying to you today about the laws of physics, if we're in a galaxy far, far away and a long, long time ago, with my dear friend Yoda and others, the laws of physics could be different, but they're not. We know now that the laws of physics are the same for our whole universe, and as far as we can have any sense, have been so from the beginning of our universe 13.8 billion years ago, which, by the way, didn't begin in a big bang. It was not big, and it's most certainly not a bang. It was more a big breath. Yes, as far as we have any sense, space and time began then. But it wasn't a chaotic explosion. It was literally, as the ancients said, an out-breath from its tiniest and most simple ever since, with time flowing and space expanding, to not just exist as a universe, but to evolve as a universe, to increase from that simplest first moment as a baby universe to adulthood and beyond, from simplicity to complexity, to self-aware beings like ourselves, able to be curious, able to try and find out what the nature of the universe and the deeper nature of reality is all about. The problem is the 20th century science revolution was incomplete. Quantum physics and relativity don't speak to each other. Quantum physics doesn't know anything about time, and relativity theory doesn't really have anything that quantized within it. Quantum just means packet. It just means that instead of being continuous, the nature of energy and matter are in little packets. And so like notes of music, rather than continuous. But it was incomplete because they didn't speak to each other. Not only that, more recent discoveries such as dark matter and dark energy have shown that energy matter visible is only about 4% of our universe. So with a 4% explanation, we can hardly say physics has got the answer. But the biggest piece was that it still identified reality as being separate and materialistic. And the elephant in the room that it completely shoved to the side, as much as you can push an elephant to the side, is the nature of consciousness, the nature of mind. And that's where this latest perspective comes in. First of all, we know that physical reality is incredibly ephemeral. When we dig down to atomic levels and smaller, we realize that physical reality is 99.99999999999% nothingness. The only reason we don't fall through the floor is something called Pauli's exclusion principle. And all that's about is about right relations between subatomic entities, where they don't just, they shake hands, they don't sort of try and work through each other. So there's an appearance of difference, an appearance of relationship rather than merging. If that wasn't here, none of us would be here, because we'd be all merged into some grey gloop of existence. And clearly we're not, and clearly our universe isn't. And I think that's very, very important and right. And what's left after that, lots of nines, the remainder is excitations, relationships between fields of energy, but something deeper than energy. And what we realize now, and this has only come about in the last few years, this is really the game changer. And this game changer has actually come about through technology and the realization by informational scientists that the same digitized bits of information that play out through our technologies is exactly the same as universal information that is more fundamental than energy and matter and space and time. And so physics is in the process of starting to restate the laws of physics as literal algorithms of information, enabling our universe to exist and evolve. A hologram captures information from light bounced back off an object. It could be a person, it could be an apple, it could be anything, and projects it onto a two-dimensional film. So if you think of a 3D object, the light radiating is captured by a hologram. All that information is then put onto a two-dimensional film. When we shine a light through that 2D film, the hologram, the 3D appearance of the object is recreated. What we're now realizing, and so the digital information or technologies is the same, as I mentioned, as universal digitized information that makes up our universe. So turn it round the other way. Instead of a hologram capturing information from a 3D object and creating through a 2D film a 3D hologram, our universe turns it round the other way. And from studies of black holes and the way information of stars actually doesn't disappear when a black hole's created, it actually remains on the surface area of the black hole. That information is not proportional to the 3D sphere volume of a black hole, but to its two-dimensional surface area. So from that study of black holes, cosmologists have extended this understanding to the whole universe. So more and more, and this is where the evidence is leading, all that we call the reality of our universe is essentially a cosmic hologram. And who creates the cosmic hologram? We'll get to that. But essentially consciousness. Cosmic consciousness. And us as microcosmic co-creators of our universe's realities. We are information. We inform, and I use that hyphen because we're not talking about random data. We're talking about interconnected, relational, meaningful, purposeful information. From the very get-go, our universe was set up not just to exist, but to evolve. It had a purpose. When you think of our own purpose, and perhaps begin to set it within an evolutionary impulse of our entire universe's purpose, this really breathes it out to the bigger picture. But that bigger picture also breathes back into our own personal choices. Because to be here, there is meaning. To be here, there is innate purpose in reality and existence itself. And when we actually breathe out to that and then take that into our own lived purpose, wow. Our universe exists, evolves as a unified and finite entity. Our universe, from all we now are learning cosmologically, isn't lasting forever. Just as it began 13.8 billion years ago, like a thought form, it will have its life cycle, it will come to its end. But that life cycle will move forward, into the cosmos itself. So the point is, how is an interconnected and unified reality relevant to you? We know we're at a tipping point. We know we're producing stuff we don't want to produce. Understanding the unified nature of reality may be a great possibility for us to realize and come together. So instead of trying to get closer together from a perceived separation and purely materialistic world, we can turn round and come from unity awareness, and unity expressed in diversity. We may not be conscious of what we think and feel and do, but regardless, that interconnectivity and unity are there regardless. Very briefly before I finish, we're finding this unity, we're finding this understanding of unified reality, not just at all scales of the natural world, but all the way through our human behaviors. Two astrophysicists recently discovered and analyzed that in terms of population densities, stars and people, galaxies form in the same way that cities grow. And when we look at earthquakes, there's no such thing as an average earthquake. Instead, when we analyze earthquakes on all scales and periods, what we find, if we plant the frequency of earthquakes against their destructive power, this line forms. So all along that line, there's no such thing as an average earthquake, which makes it very difficult to predict. But when we look at conflicts, human conflicts, after the Second World War, a researcher called Lewis Richardson analysed hundreds of years of human conflicts, from 2 world wars down to tiny regional issues, and found exactly the same relationship between the frequency of a conflict and the number of human fatalities. And just to be sure that 300 years of analysis wasn't enough, Neil Johnson and his team at the University of Florida did the same with insurgencies in Iraq and Afghanistan and found out exactly the same pattern. So we collectively embody the same patterns that exist throughout the natural world. We find the same dynamic holographic patterns in ecosystems and in the internet. The way we surf social sites, the way we use our mobile phones, our fractal patterns, exactly the same as in biological ecosystems. So the question is, as we find our purpose, as we move beyond perhaps our, into the reset button of our authentic purpose, what is it that we're radiating, transceiving as part of who we are, as informational beings, as microcosmic co-creators of the realities of our universe? What we think, what we feel, what we do affects everything. It affects everything, and it has meaning, and it has purpose. So what are we going to radiate? When you have to make a choice and don't make it, that is in itself a choice. So what are our choices? We're now at a point where collectively this evidence is growing and growing to reveal that our universe and all that in it is not just profoundly interconnected, but ultimately unified. That the realities of the physical world arise from deeper non-physical realms of intention and meaning. And that there are multidimensional realms of being and intelligence and guidance and wisdom that we can have access to. It's our innate ability to do so. So as we do that, we're in a place where instead of trying to deal with the issues of our dysfunctional collective behaviors, we can actually go to the source, to the wellspring of our beliefs and our understanding of the nature of reality itself, and turn round And instead of trying to come from separation into togetherness, we turn around and realize that reality is unified and wonderfully, abundantly, joyously diversified. Then we can link up, and then we can do all together that these wonderful people who've called us all together for this weekend have provided this wonderful grail of awareness for us to explore together. So thank you.